Hello, YouTube. It has been a hot minute, at least 2 years to be sort of precise, since I've shared a practice here on my virtual yoga studio. Very much life, a lot of life has happened. But this space has always been in my purview. It has always been on my heart. And now I have some space and I feel some inspiration and some pull to be sharing a practice again. And so I'm going to right now. So excited. And as I think about sharing virtual practice here once again, the place my mind and my heart have gone is pranayama, breath work, one of my very favorite tools in the lexicon of yoga contemplative somatic tools. One of the reasons that it's my favorite is that it tends to be generally really available in a way that some other yogic practices are not sometimes, especially movement. I love movement. I teach a lot of movement, and it's not always available to us for various reasons, whether that's mind stuff, body stuff, health stuff, just the perception we have of who movement is for, largely as a result of the way that the West has treated yoga. There's a lot of reasons movement might not feel available on any given day, but breath can generally be super available to us. Now, on the other side of that coin, I want to acknowledge that breath work is not always resourcing to us all the time. And by resourcing, I mean nurturing, settling, supportive of our nervous system, of our emotional state. Sometimes trying to bring attention to our breath can amplify any tension we might feel in our emotional state. On some days, it becomes more stressful to try to focus on the breath, to focus on the body in the way that our breath asks us to try to make changes to the breath. That can also be stressful. And so I want to acknowledge that it's not always the practice every time. And it's still one of my favorites because there's so many doorways into breath practice and so many ways that it can be nourishing to us. And one of those ways, the reason that it is one of my favorite practices, is because breathing gives us an opportunity to have a pretty direct conversation with our nervous system and with our emotional body. And when we shift our breath, we can shift our state. When we shift something so fundamental as the pattern of our breath, when we kind of disrupt that and change it around, it can disrupt and shift patterns of thought, patterns of stress, patterns of like emotional energy and the way that that is moving in us. And even just bringing awareness to the breath, even if we never change the breath, can create shift, because focusing on the way that our body is expanding and releasing, the way that life is moving in and out, is a shift in itself from the way that we're so often focusing on the mind, which can be frenetic, which can contain a little chaos, which can even be hard on us sometimes. So breathing can create shift, and I want us to breathe together. And I'm sharing a breath practice with you that I have this love affair with. And you could say it's kind of on and off, although I always love it, but I forget sometimes how much I love it. And I meander away from this breath. And then I come back and I remember, oh man, oh yeah, I really, really love this breath. And the breath is Kapalabhati, or the breath of fire. I forget, and then I always remember that I love the breath of fire so much. And it's really interesting because Kapalabhati, or the breath of fire, is activating. It is an energizing, dynamic, sometimes high intensity breath, as you might kind of guess from the way that it has fire, or the fact that it has fire in the name. It has a high energy to it. It can be kind of fast paced. It can involve some kind of dynamic movement in the body. And so there's something that is a little intensifying and a little activating about it. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to give that caveat of breath work is not always settling all the time, especially the ones like this one that are meant to be activating. But something kind of wild about this breath for me is that even though it is activating, even though it is high energy, and even though I myself spend a lot of time in that place, kind of at my baseline, anxiety is one of the things that's with me a lot. So I'm often activated for free. I'm often kind of in an up, high energy, sometimes frenetic place, just based on the way that I am. But what's really interesting about the fact that, or about this activating breath for me, is that the movement of it, because there's a lot of diaphragmatic movement. the fast-paced diaphragmatic movement that we're working with when we're working with the breath of fire is actually so soothing to me. Feeling the kind of pumping, because we're trying to pump the belly like a wave in this breath, and I will say more about what that means in a moment, but feeling that kind of pumping action, that quick movement of my diaphragm is so soothing to me. It almost feels like a massage of this area right below my ribs, which is an area that I often carry and sense my activation. I often feel the tightness and the charged upness of my anxiety right here. So even though the breath itself is sort of high energy, like anxiety can be, the massage, the motion of the diaphragmatic breath and movement that happens in breath of fire feels like it kind of massages out and kind of pumps out some of that activation and that tension that can come from my anxiety in this space. And that's the thing about breath is not always resourcing all the time. Is, what that implies is we get to choose in any given moment what tool we need, and it's going to be different in any given moment. Sometimes when we're feeling stressed out, activated, we need something the direct opposite of that. We need something soothing to kind of bring it down a little bit. But sometimes when we're activated, what we need the most is to meet the activation, to go to that place with ourselves and use that level of like high, big, sometimes intense energy to kind of brush out, press out, release that activation through the process of kind of getting a little activated. So all of that is to say, I'm excited about this breath. That's why I love it. And I highly encourage you to listen to yourself always. Even as we start to do the breath, if you feel like, yep, this is a day that I could do some breath work, that would feel good. This is a day that I could do some high energy breath work in particular. Even as we get into the practice, if you start to notice, nope, actually, this is not it for me today, you get to put it down and come back when it is. There will be some days when this is what you need, some days when it's not. And I highly encourage you to do the practice of listening to yourself. That is a really important and fundamental practice that holds us just as much as the breath practice can do. So now if you're coming along, let's get into it. Let's get into a little Kapalabhati or breath of fire tutorial. And a couple things. I know I've done a general spiel about how, any breath and any high energy breath could be activating, and you should listen to yourself. But some specific things about breath of fire, some potential contraindications for this breath that you might want to be aware of. If it is a heavy flow day on your cycle, if you have anything going on with blood pressure, with the heart, with glaucoma, it's not to say that this breath is totally ruled out for you, but just be aware of those things, and those will be kind of extra incentive to listen to what you actually need and what will be resourcing for you. So here we go with no further ado. Kapalabhati in Sanskrit can translate as skull shining. So though this is kind of known as in English the breath of fire, it's also known as the skull shining breath. And the way that I think about that, there are so many different ways we can interpret that transliteration. But what it makes me think of is polishing. Like we're polishing up our internal landscape a little bit with the heat of the fire that we're trying to generate together, kind of polishing things up, getting a little shinier, a little clearer. And it's a heating breath. It is a fiery breath. Like I alluded to earlier, one of the mechanisms of action in this breath is we're trying to pump the belly like a wave. And according to yoga philosophy, the belly is the area in our body that is most strongly correlated to the element of fire. A couple of reasons for that are we've got our digestive system right here, and that digestive fire, it's literally metabolizing things. Just like fire can transform things from one state to another, right? Wood to ash, solid to liquid. Our digestive fire is transforming our food into energy. So we've got fire in that way. We also have our huge psoas muscle, our deep, big, strong core muscles. And that's that element of fire, and like the core, like the sun, and the sun's fire is the core of our solar system. So belly fire, that's kind of the why behind why we use the belly to connect to fire. So we're trying to make heat in the body by pumping the belly like a wave. And it's interesting to me because I think about how the belly's right here, The heart is right here, right above the belly. So I think one of the things we can do and can think about from an intention perspective, kind of what our internal intention might be with this breath, is that we are heating up the heart from underneath. Just like a stove heats a pot of boiling water from underneath, we're using the heat to light up the heart and to warm up the heart. So the way that this works is that we exhale with a really strong, sharp exhale, and it does not sound dissimilar to blowing our nose. So a little example of how this would sound is, so we go sharp and strong through the nose, and we do a little contraction in the abdomen. We gently, it might not be that gentle, but we mindfully pull the navel toward the spine to press out the air with that strong exhale. So that's the exhale and how that kind of goes. The inhale is a little different. It's shorter and it's about a quarter of a breath. So the inhale starts to kind of happen on its own. The emphasis is on that strong exhale, and that's how we get the belly pumping action. So an example of how that might sound all together. So that's a general idea of how it looks, how it sounds, because you might be able to see my belly is physically doing that pumping action. And that's how I get that diaphragmatic massage that feels so awesome to me. And as I did that, you might have heard I was going at a certain pace. And I will go at a certain pace as I take us through a couple rounds of this breath together. You can go faster than me. You can go slower than me. You can take breaks, especially because this is such an activating breath. You get to decide if it ever becomes too heady for you, if you feel activated enough and you want to step it back. Alternatively, you can light the fire bigger. You can dial that heat up as much as you want to. So I'm going to take us through a round of this breath. I'm going to have us pause and kind of integrate and digest that for a moment. I'll take us through one more round together. You can always say yes or no to any of this, right? And then we'll pause again. We'll do a little more contemplation, integration, and that'll be our practice. So to do any kind of breath work, you could treat it like you would if you were going into a meditation. You find a seat that is relatively spacious and comfortable. You might be putting some support under your tailbone in the form of a cushion or blanket or yoga block. You might be crossing your legs, in the kind of classical yogic or meditative posture, but I don't think that's the only posture. You can position your arms and your legs however you'd like, so you have some space. And we generally want that sense of space, especially in the spine, which is kind of for all intents and purposes our center. So you start to find your seat and you start to find some space in the spine. Oh, my speaker was on. There we go. It went off right in time for our breath practice. But you start to find that space. You might even float your spine long without having to be stiff or stick straight, but just making room for yourself. You can always place your hands and arms wherever it feels settling. But for this breath, you might see what it's like to put one hand over the center of your chest, one at your abdomen, starting to find that connection between the belly fire and the ignition of our hearts. As we get ready to go into round number 1, you could be choosing to close your eyes. You could take a more internal gaze by looking down instead of closing your eyes, or you could just gaze at a focal point if you don't want to close your eyes at all. From here, getting ready to breathe together, we'll start with just whatever feels like a big, spacious breath in before we go into the breath pattern. Full clearing breath out. Let's do that 2 more times, just starting to get a little oxygenated, a little in touch with the breath. Big breath out. Let's do it 1 more time, bigger breaths. Release it. See if you can start to gently draw your navel towards your spine to press out some air, to get those abdominal muscles online, because we'll use them in Kapalabhati. Then for Kapalabhati, we'll begin with a quarter breath in. Your pace. Starting to finish up, let the last exhale here be long. Gently pressing that navel towards spine again to press out the air. Maybe some surface tension goes with it. And then consider pausing here on the non-breath, if and only if your body, your system are okay with that. Using that disruption of breath to play with that idea of disrupting thoughts, disrupting stress, seeing if we can access this sense of clarification that working with fire can sometimes offer. You breathe whenever you need to. If you're still pausing the breath, let the next inhale be gentle. Let the exhale be gentle, and let the breath kind of exist softly at a baseline without having to be any kind of way. Letting go of shifting the breath for now and just watching for a moment, observing, taking a moment to digest, to integrate the effects of that first round of Kapalabhati, noticing any sensation you might feel, any feedback. You might feel energized, you might feel some warmth. You might notice what it was like for you to get that massaging action going in your diaphragm. Maybe there's even just the possibility of more space in that area where the tension of anxiety can sometimes live. Just using the fire, just like digestive fire helps us metabolize food, this fire may be helping us metabolize tension. Just taking a moment to sit, one more moment to sit with whatever that feels like for you. And then after your next exhale is complete, we'll go for one more round. Say yes or no. You could be activated, fired up enough, or you might want to try this again. One time, this time, we'll just start with one of those big and spacious breaths in. Full long release of the breath, gently drawing navel to spine. Quarter breath in for round 2, Kapalabhati. Finishing up if you haven't yet. Last exhale is long again, pressing out maybe some air, maybe some tension. Once again, consider if it is not adding stress to pause on that out breath, to pause in the space of being a little disrupted, clarified, empty, but in the way that is open and spacious and full of potential. Breathe whenever you need to. If you haven't yet, soft breath in and out as once again the breath just returns to some kind of baseline. Just doing what it does. You no longer need to change it. And once again, you just use that sense of digestion to now digest the impact of 2 rounds of Kapalabhati, skull shining, the breath of fire. If you're into a little bit of visualization, you might imagine that you could see or just feel and sense that fire, that inner fire in the solar plexus, in the abdomen, underneath the hand that might be there right now. And it's like you could feel and sense the warmth growing, starting to rise like smoke rises toward the center of your chest, the heart space underneath the other hand, if it is there. So that the warmth of your inner fire, your inner light, your empowerment, which is what belly energetic, belly work can grant us access to, but that the warmth of your empowerment rises like smoke, warms your heart, maybe helps to melt away any tightness, tension, stickiness around the heart that is freely available to be melted and metabolized. And you get to be lit up from within. Just watching what that might feel like, that sense of being lit up, or just the possibility of that, even if that is not directly available right now. Being lit up can sometimes translate to feeling fueled, like we have fuel, like we have momentum. And when we have light and momentum, we have more to give. We have more of us, our lit up, awake and aware hearts to give. And we're in a world right now that very much needs that, needs more lit up, empowered hearts offering what they have to offer from that place of depth to the world around them. For so many reasons, it matters that you practice. So, from where we are in acknowledgement of that, maybe gather your hands to touch this time, thumbs at center of chest, pranam or heart centering. Maybe take a moment to bow your forehead towards your chest as a bow to your lit up heart, a bow of service as we try to do this practice, all practices, to benefit the world, to benefit everyone. And I offer a deep bow to you. Thank you so much for practicing. Like I said, it matters that you practice. Always so grateful to share virtual space with you. Thanks for joining me in my virtual studio. If this was helpful, please do like, subscribe, share, leave a comment. And if you have any questions, if you have any feedback, please do share. You can do that here, or you can find me on Instagram at Lara Tara. And I will see you next time.